It began on a Tuesday morning. The skies over every major city on Earth suddenly darkened as a massive shadow fell across the land. People stopped in the streets and looked up. Traffic halted. Phone calls were interrupted. Every television broadcast and internet stream cut to the same image. An enormous spacecraft at least 5 miles long had entered Earth's orbit. The vessel resembled a giant metallic arrowhead, with glowing blue lines running along its hull. It hovered silently, making no aggressive moves, but its presence alone caused worldwide panic. In the first hours, there were traffic accidents, heart attacks, and even suicides as people feared the end had come. President Elaine Morgan was in the middle of a budget meeting when Secret Service agents burst into the Oval Office. "Madam President, you need to come with us now," said Agent Miller, his face pale. Within minutes, she was in the Presidential Emergency Operations Center beneath the White House, surrounded by military leaders and intelligence officials. "What do we know?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. General Scott Douglas, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, pointed to the screens showing the vessel. "Nothing yet. It's just sitting there. All attempts at communication have gone unanswered." As if hearing his words, every electronic device on Earth simultaneously activated. Television screens, computers, phones, radios, all played the same message in perfect English. "People of Earth. We are the Galactic Empire, rulers of the 7 spiral arms and 10,000 worlds. Your planet is now under our protection and jurisdiction. We require tribute as payment for this service. Your world leaders will receive detailed instructions. Resistance is inadvisable." The message repeated in every language on Earth. President Morgan immediately called for an emergency United Nations meeting. Within hours, world leaders gathered virtually as global markets crashed, and religious leaders called for calm. "We need to show unity," Morgan told the assembled faces on screen. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Just as the UN Secretary General began speaking, all screens switched to show a new figure. It appeared humanoid but with gray-blue skin, large black eyes, and no visible hair. It wore what looked like ceremonial armor with strange symbols. "I am Lord Zexthar, ambassador of the Galactic Empire and commander of the Tribute Collector," it said, its mouth moving oddly with the English words. "Your world has been added to Imperial holdings. As is standard procedure for primitive worlds, you will provide tribute to demonstrate your acceptance of Imperial protection." The UN Secretary General attempted to speak, but his microphone seemed disabled. Lord Zexthar continued without pause. "Earth will provide 30% of all precious metals mined annually, 25% of your fossil fuel reserves, 10% of freshwater resources, and 100,000 humans for labor purposes." Gasps and shouts filled the virtual meeting, but Lord Zexthar spoke over them. "This is not a negotiation, this is standard procedure. You have 7 Earth days to prepare the first collection. Coordinates for tribute collection points will be transmitted shortly. Failure to comply will result in corrective measures." The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence in its wake. At the Pentagon, Admiral Frank Daniels slammed his fist on the conference table. "Labor purposes? They're talking about slaves." The Defense Secretary nodded grimly. "The President has authorized you to prepare military options while she attempts diplomacy." "What kind of options do we have against that?" someone asked, pointing at satellite images of the massive vessel. Admiral Daniels straightened his uniform. "We assess, we plan, and we show these space bullies that humanity doesn't surrender without a fight." As world leaders struggled to respond publicly, intelligence agencies shared concerning findings. NASA scientist Lisa Coleman presented data to a joint intelligence committee. "We've detected signs that other bodies in our solar system may have been harvested," she explained, showing images of unusual markings on Mars and several moons of Jupiter. These patterns appeared within the last year, suggesting the Empire may have been working its way through our system. In California, nuclear physicist Dr. Alan Wright received an urgent call from his old Navy friend, Admiral Daniels. "Alan, I need you in Washington yesterday. We're looking at weapon options for something I can't discuss on this line." "Against the ship?" Wright asked bluntly. The line was silent for a moment. Yes. Conventional weapons would be like throwing rocks at a battleship, Frank. What about unconventional ones? Wright understood immediately. I'll be on the next flight. Meanwhile, United Nations representatives attempted to re-establish communication with Lord Zexithar. After hours of broadcasting requests, he finally reappeared. Your attempts at negotiation are tedious, he said. The tribute terms are standard for worlds of your development level. We wish to understand more about the Empire, said the Chinese representative carefully. Perhaps a cultural exchange is not required. You will be assimilated into Imperial knowledge networks once you have proven yourselves worthy through obedience. The Japanese ambassador spoke next. And these humans for labor. Would they return to Earth? Lord Zexithar's expression didn't change. Labor assignments are generally permanent. However, productive worlds may earn visitation rights in future centuries. The transmission ended abruptly. At a secret facility in Colorado, Admiral Daniels met with Dr. Wright and a team of military specialists. The President is still pursuing diplomatic options, Daniels explained, but she's authorized me to prepare alternatives. They're clearly technologically superior, said Colonel Samantha Powell, the Air Force Space Operations Specialist. But they're also arrogant. They call us primitive. Dr. Wright nodded thoughtfully. That arrogance might be their weakness. Their shields and defenses would be calibrated against threats they consider worthy. Energy weapons, antimatter, things beyond our technology. But not against what they consider primitive weapons, Admiral Daniels asked. Possibly not, Doctor, Wright replied. We should get more information about their shield capabilities. That evening, President Morgan addressed the nation. She spoke of cooperation and calm, while her eyes conveyed a different message, one of determination and resistance. In the days that followed, Special Forces Captain Richard Hayes led covert teams tracking smaller scout ships that had descended from the main vessel. These sleek craft were appearing over major resource deposits and population centers, scanning and taking samples. They're mapping us, Hayes reported back, cataloging everything of value. As the 7-day deadline approached, President Morgan publicly announced Earth's compliance with the Empire's demands. Behind closed doors, however, Operation Thermopylae was taking shape, named after the ancient battle where a small force stood against a vast empire. The plan was dangerous and desperate, but as Admiral Daniels told the Joint Chiefs, throughout history, empires have fallen because they underestimated those they conquered. We may be primitive by their standards, but we're not without teeth. Dr. Wright worked day and night, modifying existing nuclear warheads based on readings from the alien vessels. Colonel Powell coordinated with space agencies worldwide. Captain Hayes prepared teams to gather intelligence during the coming collection. And in orbit above them all, the tribute collector waited, its crew confident in their routine mission to another primitive world, completely unaware that this particular primitive world had a long history of fighting back against those who demanded its submission. Admiral Frank Daniels looked around the room at the team he had assembled. They met in an underground facility 2,000 feet beneath a mountain in Colorado. The room was filled with screens showing the alien ship that still loomed in Earth's orbit. The clock is ticking, Daniels said. In 5 days, they expect us to hand over our resources and our people. Dr. Alan Wright stepped forward. The nuclear physicist had barely slept in 2 days. I've been studying the scans of their ship. Their shield technology is unlike anything we've seen before. He pulled up images on the main screen. But here's the interesting part. When their smaller ships come down to scan our resources, their shields show a specific energy pattern. They're designed to stop weapons much more advanced than ours. Colonel Samantha Powell raised an eyebrow. Are you saying they might not be protected against our weapons? Not exactly, Dr. Wright clarified. Their shields would still stop conventional missiles, but they might not be calibrated for the specific radiation signature of our nuclear weapons. A silence fell over the room as the implications became clear. They think we're primitive, Captain Richard Hayes said. He had just returned from observing one of the alien scout ships. Their guards didn't even seem concerned when they spotted our surveillance drones. They swatted them away like flies, but didn't bother to track where they came from. Admiral, Daniels nodded slowly. Pride. The oldest weakness in warfare. They don't respect us enough to fear us. The red phone on the wall rang. Admiral Daniels answered it, listening intently. Yes, Madam President. We'll be ready. He hung up and addressed the room. President Morgan has authorized us to proceed with military planning while she keeps up the appearance of cooperation. Colonel Powell pulled up a map of Earth with 12 points marked. These are the locations where the Empire has demanded the tribute be gathered. Major population centers and resource-rich areas. Perfect collection points, Captain Hayes noted, and perfect targets. Over the next 2 days, militaries across the world secretly coordinated through encrypted channels. Russian submarines moved silently into new positions in the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. Chinese missile systems were quietly readied. European nations pooled their resources and intelligence. In Washington, President Morgan maintained a public face of cooperation. She gave speeches about necessary sacrifice and galactic realities. We must face this new chapter in human history with dignity, she said to the cameras, while her eyes conveyed a different message to those who knew to look. Meanwhile, intelligence. Officer Jack Martinez made a disturbing discovery. He brought his findings directly to Admiral Daniels. Sir, I've been analyzing the transmissions from the Empire ship. Their language contains references to other planets. I cross-referenced the star patterns they mentioned with our astronomical data. He showed Daniels a star map with several systems highlighted in red. These were all described in past tense with terms that translate roughly to consumed or harvested. The pattern suggests they don't just take tribute once. Daniels' face darkened. They strip planets completely over time. Martinez nodded. Yes, sir. They start with reasonable demands, then increase them until nothing is left. This information was quickly shared with President Morgan and other world leaders. The need for resistance was no longer questioned, only the method. Dr. Wright worked day and night to modify nuclear warheads. We need to change the radiation signature to something their shields might not be calibrated for, he explained to his team of scientists. It's like finding a backdoor in their security system. Colonel Powell coordinated with space agencies around the world. We need to know exactly where their ships will land and how many troops they'll deploy, she instructed her teams. 3 days before the tribute deadline, an opportunity presented itself. One of the Empire's scout ships landed in a remote area of northern Canada to take soil samples. Captain Hayes and a small team of special forces from multiple nations were waiting. They observed the alien crew from hiding. The aliens wore what appeared to be light protective suits but no heavy armor. They clearly didn't expect any threat. They're not even carrying serious weapons, Hayes whispered into his comm. Just small sidearms, probably for local wildlife. This information was crucial. The Empire's overconfidence might give Earth a chance. With 2 days remaining, world leaders met again in secret. President Morgan led the discussion. The plan is simple, she said. We appear to comply. We gather the requested resources at the collection points. We send volunteers posing as the human tribute. And when their ships land and they're at their most vulnerable, we strike simultaneously at all collection points. The Russian president spoke up. And what about their main ship in orbit? If even one nuclear weapon strikes it, the fallout could affect Earth. Dr. Wright addressed this concern. We've calculated the optimal detonation points. If we can hit their engines, the ship will be disabled and will drift away from Earth before any major systems explode. The Chinese president looked skeptical. And if we fail, they will surely retaliate. Admiral Daniels stepped forward. If we fail, they'll strip our planet bare anyway, according to their own historical records. At least this way, we choose how our story ends. As the meeting concluded, the leaders of Earth made their decision. Operation Thermopylae would proceed. The day before the collection, volunteers worldwide prepared to pose as the human tribute. They were actually military personnel, carrying hidden communication devices and trained to gather intelligence from Inside the alien ships, Colonel Powell briefed these brave men and women. Your job is to observe everything: ships' layouts, weapon systems, communication methods. If we fail tomorrow, this information might help the next resistance effort. That night, in military bases and civilian homes across the planet, people prepared for what might be humanity's last stand. Parents held their children close. Soldiers wrote letters to loved ones. Religious leaders offered prayers. In the White House, President Morgan recorded 2 messages, one to be broadcast if they succeeded, one to be played if they failed. In his temporary office at the Pentagon, Admiral Daniels studied the final attack plans. Each nuclear launch had been calculated precisely, with redundancies built in case some failed. "Do you think we have a chance?" asked Dr. Wright, who had joined him for a final review. Admiral Daniels looked at the images of the massive alien ship. In every war in human history, someone had better technology, better weapons, more soldiers, but not always more heart. He pointed to a famous painting on the wall showing a historical last stand of outnumbered soldiers. "They see us as primitives. Tomorrow they'll learn that even primitives can have teeth." As dawn broke on Collection Day, the massive tribute collector in orbit began to deploy 12 smaller ships toward Earth. Operation Thermopylae was about to begin. The day of tribute collection arrived with clear skies across most of the planet. It was as if nature itself wanted a good view of what would happen next. At each of the 12 collection points, massive piles of resources were gathered. Gold, oil, minerals, and tankers of fresh water waited beside groups of solemn-faced volunteers for the human tribute. In reality, these volunteers were military personnel from countries across the world. Each carried hidden communication devices and had memorized the layout of the Empire ships based on Captain Hayes's reconnaissance. President Morgan addressed the world from the White House Rose Garden. She wore a blue suit and spoke with calm determination. "Today marks a new chapter for humanity," she said. "We join the galactic community by contributing our fair share to the empire that now protects us." To most listeners, it sounded like surrender, but military commanders recognized the coded phrases hidden in her speech. Fair share meant ready positions. Protects us meant prepare weapons. Admiral Daniels watched from the Pentagon Command Center as 12 Empire ships descended from the main vessel. Each ship was shaped like a teardrop and glowed with the same blue energy as their mothership. "Defensive systems?" Daniels asked. "Minimal," replied the technician monitoring the scans. "They're not expecting trouble." The ships landed simultaneously at the 12 collection points. In New York, Beijing, Moscow, London, Rio de Janeiro, Sydney, Cairo, Mumbai, Tokyo, Berlin, Mexico City, and Johannesburg, the alien vessels touched down with a soft hum. Large doors opened on each ship, and the Empire officials emerged. They resembled Lord Zexathar but wore simpler uniforms. Each was accompanied by robotic assistants that floated above the ground. At the New York collection point, an Empire official approached the gathered resources. He carried a small device that scanned the piles of gold and other metals. "Acceptable. Quality," he said in slightly accented English. "Begin loading." The robotic assistants moved forward and began transferring the resources into the ship using anti-gravity technology. The metals and barrels of oil floated effortlessly into the vessel's cargo hold. Colonel Samantha Powell was among the volunteers at the New York site. She wore civilian clothes and kept her eyes down as the Empire official approached the human. "Group, form a line," he ordered. "You will be processed and assigned duties based on physical capabilities." Powell joined the line with the others. As they slowly moved toward the ship's entrance, she activated her hidden communication device with a subtle movement. It began scanning and transmitting data about the ship's interior. Similar scenes played out at the other 11 collection points. The Empire officials were efficient but showed no emotion. They treated the humans like objects being catalogued. In London, one official spoke to his assistant while scanning a young man. "Adequate muscle tone. Mining assignment." In Beijing, another official examined the water supplies. "Lower purity than standard. Note for future correction." At the Pentagon, Admiral Daniels watched as data streamed in from all 12 sites. The pattern was clear. The Empire ships had minimal shields active and had deployed only a small security detail at each location. "They really don't see us as a threat," Daniel said quietly. Dr. Wright stood beside him, looking at the readings. "Their arrogance is our opportunity. Their shields could stop our best fighter jets, but they haven't activated the systems that would detect nuclear launches." At the Moscow collection point, one of the Empire officials spoke to another in their own language. A hidden translator, device carried by one of the volunteers, captured the conversation. "How long until this planet is fully harvested?" asked the junior official. 20 years, perhaps less," replied the senior one. "They have good resources, but nothing exceptional. The humans might make decent labor for the mining colonies." The translation was immediately transmitted to all command centers. Any doubt about the Empire's intentions vanished. In the White House Situation Room, President Morgan received the translation. Her face hardened as she read it. "Give the order," she said to her military advisor. The coded message went out to all armed forces. "Professor Henry has completed his research." At the New York collection site, Colonel Powell had reached the entrance to the Empire ship. As she stepped inside, she took careful note of everything she saw. The interior was surprisingly simple. Corridors with metal walls and minimal decoration. The Empire valued function over appearance. She was led with the others to a large room where they were being processed. An Empire official scanned each, human with a handheld device. "Name?" he asked when he reached Powell. "Samantha Jones," she lied, using her cover identity. The official didn't look up from his device. "Age?" 32. "Medical conditions?" "None." He made a notation. "Assigned to agricultural colony Zeta 6. As Powell moved forward, she noticed something concerning. The ship was beginning to power up its engines. They were preparing to leave earlier than intelligence had predicted. She pressed a hidden button on her device twice, the signal for accelerate the timeline. In the waters near New York, a nuclear submarine received the signal. The captain looked at his executive officer. "It's time," he said. Similar scenes played out around the world. Nuclear submarines, hidden silos, and stealth bombers all received the same message. The carefully coordinated plan had to be executed now, before the ships could take off with their human cargo. At the Pentagon, Admiral Daniels gave the final order. "Execute Operation Thermopylae." Across the globe, nuclear weapons were launched simultaneously. They streaked toward the 12 landed Empire ships and the massive mothership in orbit. In space aboard the tribute collector, Lord Zexthar received an urgent message. "My lord, we're detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface." Zexthar looked annoyed. "The primitives are celebrating with fireworks. Ignore it." "Sir, these appear to be weapons. They're headed directly for our collection vessels." For the first time, Zexthar showed an emotion that looked like surprise. "Impossible. Their weapons are primitive. Raise shields on all vessels immediately." But the order came too late. As the 12 collection ships began activating their defensive systems, the first modified nuclear warheads reached their targets. On the ground, people watched in awe as bright flashes lit up the sky. The specially modified nuclear weapons detonated at precisely calculated distances from the Empire ships. Inside the New York ship, Colonel Powell and the other disguised military personnel threw themselves to the floor as the vessel shook violently. Empire official looked genuinely shocked. "The primitives are attacking? How is this possible?" It was the last thing he said before the ship's systems began to fail around them. The modified nuclear warheads struck with perfect timing. 12 bright flashes lit up skies around the world as the Empire's collection ships were hit. Unlike normal nuclear weapons, these had been specially altered by Dr. Wright to produce radiation patterns that the alien shields weren't designed to block. Inside the New York collection ship, Colonel Powell grabbed onto a wall fixture as the vessel shook violently. Emergency lights flashed red and alien warning sounds blared through speakers. The Empire officials ran in panic, no longer looking superior or calm. "Get to the control room," Powell shouted to her team members. They had trained for this moment. All around the world, similar scenes played out as the human volunteers revealed themselves to be military personnel. They quickly subdued the surprised Empire officials and fought their way toward vital areas of each ship. In orbit, the massive tribute collector was under attack as well. 6 submarine-launched missiles approached it from different angles. Lord Zexithar stood on the command bridge, his face showing shock for the first time. "Impossible," he said, as he watched the primitive weapons approach. "Raise all shields." Evasive maneuvers. The huge ship began to move, but it was slow to respond. Its shields glowed blue as they activated, but they had been calibrated to stop energy weapons and meteorites, not the specific type of nuclear devices Earth had launched. The first missile hit the ship's lower section. The shield flickered but held. The second and third hit nearly the same spot in quick succession. On the fourth impact, the shield failed and the warhead made direct contact with the hull. A massive explosion tore through the side of the tribute collector. Secondary explosions followed as systems overloaded. "We are under attack by primitives?" Lord Zexthar shouted at his crew. This has never happened in Imperial history. At the Pentagon, Admiral Daniels watched the satellite imagery with tense focus. "Status of ground teams?" he asked. "Colonel Powell's team has secured the New York ship," reported an officer. "Moscow, Beijing, and London teams report success as well. Still waiting on the others." President Morgan entered the command center, her face grim but determined. "The world needs to know what's happening," she said. On her order, all global communications networks broadcast the same message. "People of Earth, the Galactic Empire plan to harvest our planet completely. We have launched a coordinated defense. Please remain in secure locations." Inside the New York ship, Colonel Powell and her team worked quickly. They had secured the main control room and subdued the Empire crew. A tech specialist examined the alien controls. "I think I understand their navigation system," he said. "Basic principles are similar to ours, just more advanced." Powell nodded. "Can you access their data systems?" "Working on it," he replied. These symbols seem to indicate file categories. Meanwhile, on the Moscow ship, Captain Hayes had established control and found something important. "We've accessed their communication logs," he reported over the secure channel. "The Empire has been doing this for thousands of years. They find worlds, demand tribute, and gradually strip them completely." This information was quickly shared with all command centers. Dr. Wright, analyzing the data at the Pentagon, made a critical discovery. "They have detailed files on Earth," he told Admiral Daniels. "They've been studying us for decades. They know our military capabilities, or at least what they thought were our capabilities. What they didn't count on was our willingness to use nuclear weapons," Daniels replied. In space, the tribute collector was in serious trouble. 5 of the 6 missiles had hit their targets, causing massive damage to the engines and power systems. The enormous ship began to drift, moving away from Earth as its damaged engines misfired. Lord Zexithar sent an urgent distress signal to the Empire's nearest outpost. "This is Tribute Collector. We are under attack by the primitives on Earth. They have disabled our engines and captured collection vessels. Request immediate assistance." The reply came minutes later. "Nearest battle fleet is 8 solar cycles away. Hold position if possible." For the first time, fear showed in Zexithar's eyes. 8 cycles? We will not survive that long. On Earth, people watched the skies in awe as the massive Empire ship, now trailing fire and debris, slowly moved farther away from the planet. News spread quickly that the 12 smaller ships had been captured by Earth forces. At the United Nations, an IEO emergency session was called. Representatives from all nations gathered to hear President Morgan address them. "Today, humanity stood together against an existential threat," she said. "For the first time in our history, we truly acted as one planet, one people with one purpose: survival." In the captured ships, Earth scientists and military personnel worked frantically to understand the alien technology. In the New York ship, Colonel Powell made an important discovery. "They have star charts," she reported to Admiral Daniels. "Maps of their empire and trade routes, and something else, records of resistance movements on other worlds." "Other resistances?" Daniels asked. "So we're not the first to fight back?" "No," Powell replied. "But from these records, we may be the first to succeed on this scale." Dr. Wright joined a team examining the ship's propulsion system. "This technology is decades beyond ours," he said. "Maybe centuries, but the principles are understandable. Given time, we could adapt it." In orbit, the situation on the tribute collector grew desperate. Life support systems were failing. Lord Zexithar ordered escape pods prepared. "This is unprecedented," he told his officers. "No primitive world has ever managed to damage an Imperial vessel, let alone capture 12 collectors." One of his subordinates looked at a data screen. "My lord, the humans are broadcasting communications between all their collection points. They appear to be sharing all the information they've gathered from our ships." Zexithar's expression darkened. "If they master our technology." On Earth, fighter pilots Catherine Miller and Paul Jackson led squadrons of jets to observe the damaged tribute collector. They maintained a safe distance but recorded everything they saw. "Look at the size of that thing," Miller said over the radio. "And we actually heard it," Jackson replied. "Not bad for primitives, right?" At the White House, President Morgan met with her crisis team. "What's our status?" "We've secured all 12 collection ships," Admiral Daniels reported. "Teams are extracting technology and data as quickly as possible. The main ship continues to drift away from Earth. Our best estimate is that it will reach lunar orbit within hours." "And the human volunteers who were on those ships?" "All accounted for," Daniels said with pride. Colonel Powell's team performed perfectly. President Morgan nodded and looked at the satellite imagery of the damaged Empire ship. "What about retaliation? Will they send more ships?" Dr. Wright stepped forward with a tablet displaying information from the captured ships. "According to their logs, the nearest Imperial outpost is several light years away. Even at their speeds, it would take them months to reach us." "So we have time," Morgan said. "Time to prepare, time to learn from their technology." For the first time that day, people in the room allowed themselves small smiles. The impossible had happened. Earth had stood up to the Galactic Empire and landed a serious blow. In the Pentagon Command Center, a communications officer suddenly called out, "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Empire ship." All eyes in the Pentagon Command Center turned to the main screen as Lord Zexithar's face appeared. The once proud Imperial ambassador now looked disheveled. Smoke filled the background behind him, and emergency lights flashed. "People of Earth," he said, his voice less commanding than before. "Your unprovoked attack on Imperial vessels is an act of war. The consequences will be severe when the Imperial fleet arrives." Admiral Daniels stepped forward. "This is Admiral Frank Daniels of Earth. We found your records. We know your plans to strip our world completely. Your tribute was just the beginning." Zexithar's expression changed slightly. "You accessed our data systems?" "We did, President," Morgan said, joining Daniels. "We know about the other worlds you've harvested. We know everything." For a moment, silence filled the channel. Then Zexithar spoke again, his tone different. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. The Empire is willing to discuss more favorable terms for Earth." "You mean now that you know we can fight back?" Daniels asked. President Morgan raised her hand to quiet him. "What terms do you propose?" "A reduced tribute, recognition of Earth as a developing world with protected status, technical assistance to join the galactic community properly." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "And in return, you will release our collection, vessels, and allow our ship to return for repairs." President Morgan looked at Admiral Daniels, then at Dr. Wright. Both subtly shook their heads. "We will consider your offer," Morgan said finally. "Expect our response within one Earth day." The transmission ended. Immediately, leaders around the world connected through secure channels to discuss this development. "They're stalling," Admiral Daniels said. "They want time for reinforcements to arrive." Dr. Wright nodded. "According to their own records, it would take months for help to reach them, but they don't know how much of their data we've accessed." "What are our options?" asked President Morgan. Colonel Powell, speaking from the captured New York ship, joined the conversation. "Madam President, we've just discovered something important. These ships have a self-destruct system. It's designed to prevent their technology from falling into enemy hands." Can you disable it? Morgan asked. Already done on this vessel, Powell replied. We're sharing the procedure with the other teams. Meanwhile, scientists and engineers worldwide worked frantically to understand the alien technology. The anti-gravity systems, advanced metals, and power sources were decades beyond Earth's current capabilities. Lisa Coleman, who had first noticed the pattern of the Empire's harvesting, led a team analyzing the Empire's historical records. They've done this to thousands of worlds, she reported. But I've found something else. Records of resistance movements on other planets. We're not the only ones who fought back, just the first to succeed on this scale. In orbit, the damaged tribute collector continued to drift away from Earth. Lord Zexathar gave orders to his remaining crew. Prepare the secondary communication array. We must reach Imperial Command with a more powerful signal. Sir, an officer replied, the humans have disabled our main communications. The secondary array will take hours to reconfigure. Zexathar slammed his fist on a console. These primitives, how could they possibly have the knowledge to do this? Back on Earth, President Morgan addressed the United Nations once more. We have a choice to make, she said. The Empire has offered new terms, but we have no reason to trust them. Their history shows they never leave a world until it's completely stripped of resources. The Russian president spoke up. We have their ships now. We have their technology. Perhaps we should use it to defend ourselves properly before they return in force. This sentiment was echoed by many world leaders. The Chinese president added, their technology could solve many of Earth's problems: energy, food production, medicine. We must study it quickly. President Morgan nodded. I propose we form a new global organization, the Earth Defense Force, not controlled by any one nation, but by all of us together. The vote was unanimous. Admiral Daniels was appointed as the first commander of the Earth Defense Force. His first action was to select teams from every nation to study and adapt the alien technology. Dr. Wright led the scientific division. Their power sources are incredible, he told a group of international scientists. They use something similar to fusion, but much more efficient. With this, we could solve Earth's energy crisis. Colonel Powell continued to extract data from the Empire's systems. They have detailed maps of their territory, she reported. Their nearest outpost is 4 light-years away, but I've also found something interesting. A group of worlds that broke away from the Empire centuries ago. They might be potential allies. Over the next week, Earth transformed. The fear that had gripped humanity gave way to purpose and unity. For the first time, nations worked together without old rivalries getting in the way. The 12 captured ships were moved to secure locations around the world. Teams of scientists, engineers, and military personnel studied every aspect of them. In space, the tribute collector finally managed to send a distress signal to Imperial Command. The response came hours later. Message received. Battle fleet dispatched. Estimated arrival, 165 cycles. Maintain position if possible. Lord Zexathar received this news with dismay. 165 cycles is too long. The humans will have mastered our technology by then. On Earth, progress was indeed rapid. The anti-gravity technology was already being tested. The alien metals were being analyzed for their properties, and the star maps were being studied to understand Earth's new place in the galaxy. 2 weeks after the attack, President Morgan stood with Admiral Daniels on a runway in Nevada. Before them sat a strange craft, part Earth technology, part adapted from the Empire ships. Will it fly? Morgan asked. Daniels nodded. The test pilots say it handles well in the atmosphere. Next week we'll try it in space. Morgan looked up, at the sky. How long before we can build proper defenses? Dr. Wright estimates 6 months before we can construct a basic planetary shield. A year before we can build our own ships with their technology. And the Empire will return before then, Morgan said quietly. Yes, Daniels agreed. But they'll find a very different Earth waiting for them. Not the primitive world they thought. They could harvest, but a world that has tasted freedom and won't give it up without a fight. As they spoke, in laboratories and factories across the planet, humans worked tirelessly. The captured Empire data had revealed hundreds of worlds that had been harvested over thousands of years. Earth was determined not to join that list. Instead, humanity prepared for its new role, not as tribute for a galactic empire, but as defenders of their world and perhaps, one day, liberators of others. The Galactic Empire had demanded tribute. Earth had responded with nukes, and the universe would never be the same.